Welcome to Podkey Slopcast, where AI job redesign meets the messy reality of organizational life. A lot of the current AI conversation still sounds like task automation. The more consequential claim is bigger. Work itself may be getting reorganized around people directing systems of agents, then figuring out what human judgment is still worth paying for. The central idea here is that jobs are moving away from personally doing every step and toward managing a portfolio of AI workers that do much of the execution. If that holds, the change is not just faster output, it changes what the role is. Oversight, coordination, prioritization, exception handling, and final decisions start to matter more than manual production. What's well supported in the source material is that organizations are already experimenting this way across functions, not just in engineering. What's still uncertain is the depth of the shift. There's a big difference between using agents as glorified assistants and actually redesigning jobs around them. That distinction matters because firms have an incentive to call any automation experiment transformation. It sounds strategic, it attracts attention, and it can justify restructurings that might have happened anyway. The stronger version of the argument says the remaining human work becomes more valuable because it concentrates on judgment. The weaker version says humans just inherit monitoring burden, edge cases, and blame when the system fails. Both can be true at once. Some roles get upgraded into operator-manager hybrids, others get stripped down into supervision of output they no longer fully understand. Boris Cherny's 5 archetypes are useful because they cut across org charts and describe what kind of work actually needs doing at a given product stage. Prototyper, builder, sweeper, grower, and maintainer are less about title and more about orientation. A healthy team needs different mixes before product market fit, during growth, and in maturity. That framing is stronger than the old assumption that one generic product team can just keep doing the same thing as the company evolves. It's also more realistic that many people span 2 or 3 archetypes. Early companies especially can't afford clean specialization. Still, the model is most convincing as a diagnostic tool, not a law of nature. The risk is turning a helpful vocabulary into rigid identity labels that people defend instead of adapting. The prototyper gets a major boost from code-generating agents because the cost of making a first version drops sharply. That changes meetings into artifacts. Instead of debating an idea abstractly, someone can make the thing, test the flow, and expose what was hand-wavy. The important claim here isn't just speed, it's that cheap prototypes improve organizational truth-seeking because concrete objects force clearer feedback. But cheap prototypes also create noise. If making something is nearly free, the bottleneck moves from creation to evaluation. And a prototype can mislead precisely because it feels real. A slick demo can hide weak economics, ugly edge cases, security problems, or non-existent user demand. This is why builder work doesn't disappear. Builders care about reliability, maintainability, security, and operational standards that prototypers intentionally ignore. That is not a minor polish phase, it's a different mental model. Shipping a proof of concept rewards speed and boldness. Shipping production systems rewards caution, discipline, and respect for failure modes. Sweepers add another layer. They go into the system's DNA, re-architecting and simplifying in ways that often don't look flashy from the outside, but can determine long-term performance and cost. Maintainers are the quiet constraint on all this excitement. Someone has to preserve system health over time. The trade-off is obvious. Agentic tools encourage constant new output, while production reality punishes neglect. Teams that celebrate only prototypes are borrowing trouble from their future selves. One of the more interesting claims is that finance, HR, and operations can adopt a maker mentality because agents make bespoke software cheap enough for non-traditional builders. That sounds plausible, and the logic is straightforward. Internal teams often know their workflow pain better than a centralized product team ever will. So, if they can ship small tools and automations themselves, they can prove strategic value instead of waiting in a ticket queue. The missing context is governance. The closer tool creation gets to the edge of the org, the greater the risk of fragmented systems, uneven controls, and hidden dependencies. So the upside is local innovation. The downside is a sprawl of semi-official tooling that no one can fully audit or support. If prototypes become abundant, the scarce resource stops being ideas and starts being disciplined selection. That's where the external-facing roles come in. Editors decide which ideas deserve investment. Scouts collect market signals, and evangelists make sure outside perception and internal vision aren't drifting apart. Growers sit in a related but distinct category because their work depends on repeated contact with the market. They can't operate purely from inside the building. This part of the framework is compelling because falling prototyping costs should increase the value of curation and translation. Still, these roles can also become factories for narrative spin if their feedback loops are weak. Good editing kills pet projects. Bad editing just blesses the loudest ones. As agent output scales, someone has to manage not only people, but chains of agents and the handoffs between them. That's the case for the orchestrator and the more specialized conductor, whose job is to keep synthetic digital employees coherent with one another. This feels less like futuristic hype than a predictable coordination response. The more parallel output you generate, the more integration work you create. The open question is whether this becomes a distinct role or simply a new layer added to existing managers and operators. Either way, coherence becomes a first-order problem. Fast agents that produce incompatible work are not a productivity gain, they're a backlog generator. The strongest balancing concept in the whole set is the risk steward. The premise is that accelerated agentic work amplifies failure modes, so risk has to move upstream from gatekeeping into active early mitigation. That rings true because rapid iteration compresses the time available to notice compounding mistakes. Organizations that get good at this probably do have an advantage. They can move fast without the repeated whiplash of launches, reversals, cleanup, and loss of trust. But risk stewardship only works if it's empowered. If it's treated as a ceremonial checklist, it becomes theater with better branding. Taken together, the real story is less about AI replacing a job and more about work fragmenting into new forms of making, selecting, integrating, and safeguarding. The best supported parts are the falling cost of prototyping and the resulting need for stronger curation, coordination, and maintenance. The less certain parts are how durable these new role boundaries will be and whether organizations can redesign incentives fast enough to reward judgment instead of raw output volume. If they can't, agentic work may create more apparent productivity than actual clarity. If they can, a lot of jobs may become more managerial, more cross-functional, and more consequential in their decision points. That's it for this one from Podkey Slopcast. The interesting question isn't whether the agents can produce more, it's whether the organization around them can stay legible when they do. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.